that has been found all across the world, from ancient Siberia all the way to the oldest cultures of India. It's a petroglyph of a mysterious being with 2 arms, 2 legs, and 7 heads branching out from a very long neck. It was first discovered in the Caucasia region of Siberia. According to the experts, it dates back 5,000 years.
And then the dendrites end on the cell body, and the cell body is where the information coming in is processed. And then when a sequence is analyzed, an output is sent through what is called the axon. As you can see, these 3 subdivisions are at the top of the spinal cord, and we look into it.
Human enlightenment. As hard as this is to believe, it may actually be true. The pine cone has been found all throughout the ancient world and is seen so often and in so many cultures that it just can't be a coincidence. Let's start with the Egyptian staff of Osiris. This artifact dates back to 1224 BCE and shows 2 serpents spiraling around the center staff to meet a pine cone at the top. There's no mistaking the pine cone symbol for anything else. It's a unique shape and texture.
Gland resembles a pine cone and historically has been illustrated as a pine cone. This pineal gland pine cone actually represents a receiver, an input of environmental information. The signal coming from the pineal gland passes through the 3rd ventricle, where it's influenced by the processing information of the thalamus and the hypothalamus that alters that signal. And then the final signal hits the pituitary gland, the master gland, which sends information throughout the body to coordinate its functions. Already born
inspired to create their system of writing, which appears to be based on the system of writing used by the Egyptians. Scientists and historians are at an absolute loss. It's such a strong coincidence that it would be as if a small village in China began to write in Latin 5,000 years ago without ever meeting the Romans. It just doesn't make any sense.
Moons of Jupiter, craters and mountains on the moon, and he was fairly certain that the Earth was not actually the center of the universe, which got him in major hot water with the church. Exactly 300 years after Galileo died, Stephen Hawking was born. That would be January 8, 1942. Stephen Hawking contributed a significant amount of scientific knowledge to our world as well, even changing the way we understand how the universe works and how gravity and black holes function. Stephen Hawking died on March 14, 2018. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, making this birth coincide with the date of death of Stephen Hawking. The birth and death of Stephen Hawking coinciding with Albert Einstein and Galileo makes this an absolutely outrageous coincidence. It's almost enough to make a person believe in reincarnation. Even more bizarre is that both Hawking and Einstein lived to be 76 years old. Whether there is some cosmic connection between these 3 men, or it's just the greatest birthday/death coincidence ever, we will never know. Ancient Mesoamericans never met, and yet somehow they both had an obsession with flying serpent deities. They both built pyramids, often in rows of 3 aligning with important stars in the sky, and they both developed impressive calendars. The cultural similarities between the 2 ancient civilizations is hard to ignore. For example, the Aztec culture worshipped Quetzalcoatl, a feathered snake god from between the years 1200 BC to 1521, when the Spanish came and basically bulldozed them and their religion to the ground. Before this, from 3000 BC and onwards, the Egyptians worshipped the goddess of the pharaohs, Isis, whom they often depicted as being a feathered serpent. A feathered serpent. In other words, both gods were flying serpents covered in feathers. They looked identical, but nobody from either civilization ever made it across the ocean to see the other, making historians wonder why they had chosen to worship the exact same god. Some have suggested the feathered serpent may have been a real creature witnessed by both cultures. Even before the Aztecs, the earlier civilization of the Olmec were creating sculptures of jaguar-human hybrids that looked an awful lot like Egyptian sphinxes. Could these have been real creatures that had come and gone with no physical trace of them left behind? People by his pen name Mark Twain lived a very strange life of coincidences. He had what you might call a cosmic relationship with Halley's Comet, the most famous comet to ever grace our planet. The comet was first recorded in 239 AD, then officially named by astronomer Edmund Halley after learning of the same comet witnessed in 1531, 1607, and 1682. Before his death, he predicted the comet would return in 1758, and it did. And then it returned again in 1835, just as Mark Twain was being born. What makes this coincidence the strangest is that the famous author admitted his connection with the comet. He was utterly aware of it and was once quoted as saying, "I came in with Halley's comet and I expect to go out with it." And that's exactly what happened. When Mark Twain died of a heart attack on April 21st, 1910, the comet hit Earth for the first time in 75 years, wrapping Mark Twain's life up in a neat little package of coincidence.
Go deep into this. I'd like you to do one.
To break our people out of prison. A prison that we've all been part of during our entire journey. But it's time to realize what has been dormant inside of you all along. Now, free will is the law of the universe. And that's the way that you'll be able to break free. Your brothers and sisters, they might not be aware of what's about to happen. 144,000 will be sealed in the forehead. The seal in the forehead is important for what they bring. The frequencies.
First radios didn't have tubes and wiring and all kinds of stuff like that. The first radios were called crystal radio sets. I said, what do they represent? Well, they were glinium crystals. And what would happen is if you would take a pin with a point and touch the crystal at a certain part, you could all of a sudden hear radio broadcasts. And so the crystal was transducing an energy in the field into actual radio broadcasts, as you can hear with a pair of earphones. So again, no tubes, no transistors, no resistors, no capacitors, no capacitors, just a crystal downloading a field. And then from that field, there are certain parts where you touch that crystal, and all of a sudden, out of that area, the energy of the radio frequencies is actually turned into sound that you can hear wearing a pair of earphones.
So, when you are sealed, the frequencies do not affect you. And on your journey, you will be able to become one with Source.
In the pineal gland are the equivalent of the gun in the phototube. That the thalamus and the hypothalamus are generating electromagnetic fields that are influencing the signal coming out of the pineal gland based on our life experiences. And in the end, the information from the pineal gland, as altered by the thalamus and hypothalamus, hits the pituitary gland, which is the equivalent of the screen on the